The flames that consumed the Mitchell barn lit up the New Mexico sky like a demon's torch, and Nora Ashton stood frozen in her nightgown, watching everything her father had built turn to ash and ember. She had awakened to the smell of smoke and the sound of horses screaming. By the time she ran outside, the entire structure was engulfed, the heat so intense it pushed her back even from 50 yards away. Her father had died 3 months ago from fever, leaving her the ranch at 22 years old. Now this. The horses had escaped, thank God, scattered across the desert hills surrounding their property just outside Albuquerque, but the barn held everything else. Tools, feed, saddles, the wagon her grandfather had driven from Missouri in 1848, all of it gone. The year was 1876, and Nora had thought she had seen the worst when she buried her father. She had been wrong. Dawn came gray and exhausted. The barn was a skeleton of blackened timber, still smoking in places, the smell acrid and choking. Nora stood at the edge of the destruction, her nightgown now covered by her father's old coat, her dark hair tangled down her back. She had not cried yet. The shock was too great for tears. Miss Ashton. She turned to find a man approaching on horseback, leading 2 of her scattered mares. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a dusty brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he drew closer, she could see he was young, perhaps 25, with sun-darkened skin and serious gray eyes. A scar traced a thin line along his jaw. "Found these 2 up near Eagle Ridge," he said, his voice quiet and steady. "Figured they were yours when I saw the smoke." "Thank you," Nora managed, her voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. She had not realized until that moment that her throat burned. "That is kind of you." He dismounted, handing her the reins, then turned to look at the ruined barn. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened with what might have been sympathy or understanding. "You lose anyone in the fire?" he asked. "No. Just the horses escaped first, scattered." "My father is already gone. I am alone here." The man was quiet for a moment, studying the destruction with the eye of someone who understood such things. "This was not an accident," he said finally. Nora felt her stomach drop. "What? See there." He pointed to the far corner of what remained. The fire started in 3 places. You can tell by the burn patterns. Someone set this deliberately. The world tilted slightly. Nora grabbed the fence post to steady herself. "Who would do such a thing?" The man shook his head. "Cannot say for certain. You had any trouble lately?" "Anyone trying to buy you out?" She thought of Victor Hammond, whose ranch bordered hers to the south. He had approached her twice since her father's death, offering what he called a fair price for her land. Both times she had refused. Her father had loved this place, had poured his life into it. She would not give it up easily. "Hammond," she said, "Victor Hammond has been pressing me to sell." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Hammond runs a big operation, uses some rough hands. You know him." "I know of him. I am Yates Lawson. I have a small spread about 10 miles west, near the river. Not much, but it is mine." He met her eyes directly. "And I know Hammond has been buying up water rights wherever he can. Your land has that good spring." Nora knew it well. The spring that fed the creek running through her property was one of the reasons her father had settled here in the first place. In this desert country, water was worth more than gold. "What do I do?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Yates was quiet, studying her with those steady gray eyes. "You rebuild if you want to keep the place, but you need help. You cannot do it alone, and Hammond will not stop if he is behind this. I cannot afford to hire hands. I am not asking for money." Yates shifted his weight, and for the first time, he seemed almost uncomfortable. "I have been working my place alone for 3 years. It is hard country for one person. You help me with my roundup next month, I will help you rebuild your barn and bring in your horses. We help each other." Nora studied him, trying to read his intentions. In her experience, men did not offer help without wanting something in return. But Yates Lawson's gaze was direct and honest, and she found herself believing him. "All right," she said. "We have an agreement." He nodded once. "I will bring my tools tomorrow. We start clearing the debris first, then lay the foundation. We have enough good weather left before winter comes to get the frame up and a roof on." "Why are you doing this?" Nora asked. "You do not know me." Yates looked at the burned barn, then back at her. "My father lost everything to a prairie fire when I was 14. Took us 2 years to recover, and we only managed because neighbors helped. That is how it works out here. We help each other, or we do not survive." Something in the simple honesty of his words broke through Nora's shock. She felt the first tears finally come, hot and sudden. She turned away embarrassed, but Yates pretended not to notice. He simply mounted his horse and touched the brim of his hat. "Tomorrow at first light," he said, and rode away toward the rising sun. Nora spent the rest of the day rounding up her horses. She found 6 of the 8 by afternoon, both mares and a gelding who had not gone far, just frightened by the fire. The animals were skittish and difficult to catch without a proper corral, but she managed by using sugar from her kitchen stores and patience. By evening, she had them secured in a makeshift pen she fashioned from the few fence rails that had not been destroyed. The night was cold without the barn to block the wind. Nora lay in her bed in the small ranch house and listened to the horses moving restlessly outside. She thought about what Yates had said about the fire being deliberate. Anger burned in her chest, hot and fierce. If Hammond thought he could intimidate her into selling, he was wrong, but beneath the anger was fear. She was alone, vulnerable. If someone wanted to harm her, there was little she could do to stop them. True to his word, Yates arrived at dawn with a wagon full of tools, timber, and supplies. He worked without much conversation, methodical and efficient. Nora joined him, wearing her father's old work clothes, her hair tied back with a strip of leather. Together they began clearing the debris, sorting through the wreckage for anything salvageable. The work was hard and dirty. Nora's hands, already rough from ranch work, developed new blisters. The smell of burnt wood clung to everything. But there was something almost meditative about the labor, something that kept her mind occupied and her grief at bay. "You grew up on a ranch?" Yates asked around midday as they stopped to drink water from a shared canteen. "Yes. My mother died when I was young. My father raised me. He taught me everything, how to ride, rope, brand, mend fences. He always said a woman in this country needed to be as capable as any man. He was right about that." Yates wiped sweat from his forehead. "What made your family settle here?" "My father came from Virginia after the war. He did not want to go back to what it had been. He wanted something new, something his own. We arrived in Albuquerque in '68. I was 14. "The war was hard on everyone," Yates said quietly. "Were you in it? Too young." "But my father was. He came back different, quieter. He died 5 years ago. My mother followed him within 6 months. Some people say it was grief that took her." They fell into silence, the kind that comes from shared understanding. Both of them knew loss. Both of them knew what it meant to keep going anyway. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Yates would arrive at dawn and they would work until dark, stopping only briefly for meals. The debris was cleared, the ground leveled, the foundation stones placed. Nora found herself watching him as they worked, noticing the careful precision of his movements, the way he measured twice before cutting, the way he handled the wood as if it were valuable. "You are good at this," she said one afternoon. "My father was a carpenter before he was a farmer. He taught me young." Yates lined up another board, checking its placement. Figured it would be useful out here. It is. I could not do this alone. He glanced at her, something warm in his eyes. You are doing more than you know. Most people would have given up by now. This place is all I have left of my father. I will not give it up without a fight. Good, Yates said. Neither would I. On the 8th day, a rider approached while they were working on the frame. Nora recognized Victor Hammond immediately, his expensive horse and tailored clothes incongruous in the dusty landscape. He was a large man in his 50s with a hard face and calculating eyes. "Miss Ashton," he said, not bothering to dismount. "Heard about your barn. Terrible shame." "Yes," Nora said coolly. "It was. Makes a person think, though. Running a ranch alone is dangerous. Accidents happen." His eyes flicked to Yates, then back to her. "My offer still stands. I will give you a fair price, more than fair really, considering your current circumstances." "My answer has not changed, Mr. Hammond." His expression hardened. "You are being foolish, girl. This land is too much for you. Sooner or later you will realize that." Yates set down his hammer and walked over, placing himself slightly in front of Nora. It was not aggressive, but it was protective. "She has said no. Time for you to leave." Hammond looked at Yates with barely concealed contempt. "This does not concern you, Lawson. This is between me and Miss Ashton. Miss Ashton is not interested in selling. You have your answer." For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Then Hammond smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "We will see. Winter is coming. Lots can happen in winter." He wheeled his horse and rode off without another word. Nora realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out slowly. "He was threatening me." "Yes," Yates said grimly. "He was. What do? We finish the barn. We make this place strong again, and we watch." Yates turned to her, his expression serious. "I am going to start staying here at night if you do not mind. Sleep in the barn once we get it enclosed enough. Just in case Hammond tries something else. You do not have to do that." "I know I do not have to. I want to." His eyes met hers and something passed between them, something Nora could not quite name but felt deep in her chest. "I am not going to let him drive you off your land." That night, after Yates had ridden back to his own ranch to tend to his animals and gather supplies, Nora sat on her porch and thought about the cowboy who had walked into her life at exactly the moment she needed help. She barely knew him, yet she felt safer with him around than she had since her father died. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. The way he had positioned himself between her and Hammond without hesitation. The way his hands were both rough and gentle, strong from work but careful with everything they touched. Something was growing between them. Something neither had acknowledged yet but both could feel. The barn raising continued. Yates brought his bedroll and a few supplies, making himself a space in the corner of what would become the feed room once the walls were up. True to his word, he stayed at night, keeping watch. Nora slept better knowing he was there. They talked while they worked, long conversations that ranged from practical matters to deeper things. Yates told her about his childhood in Texas, how his family had moved to New Mexico for a fresh start after the war. How he had saved for years to buy his small spread, determined to build something that could not be taken away. Nora told him about her mother, barely remembered but deeply missed. About her father's stubbornness and pride, traits she had clearly inherited. About the loneliness of the past 3 months, trying to run the ranch alone, trying to prove to herself and everyone else that she could do it. "You should not have to prove anything," Yates said one afternoon. They were working on the roof supports, high enough that they could see for miles across the desert landscape. "You are capable. Anyone can see that. Not everyone sees it. Hammond thinks I am just a foolish girl playing at ranching. Hammond is wrong." Yates positioned another beam, his movements sure and strong. You are brave and stubborn and smart. Those are the qualities that matter out here. Nora felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. You barely know me. I know enough. He looked at her directly, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. I know you stood in front of that burned barn and decided to rebuild instead of run. That tells me everything I need to know. The moment stretched between them, charged with something electric. Then Yates looked away, clearing his throat. We should finish this section before the light fades. They worked in silence for a while, but something had shifted. The air between them felt different, heavier with possibility. That evening, Nora cooked dinner for both of them, a simple meal of beans and cornbread, but it felt intimate in a way that made her nervous. They sat on the porch steps as the sun set, painting the sky orange and purple. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Of course. Why have you never married? You are old enough, established enough. Most men out here marry young. Yates was quiet for a moment, considering. Never found the right woman, I suppose, and I have been focused on building my place, making it something substantial. Did not seem fair to ask a woman to share a half-built life. Is it built enough now? He looked at her, and the expression on his face made her heart pound. Getting there, he said softly. Definitely getting there. The barn took shape over the following weeks. The frame rose strong and solid. The roof went on. The walls were enclosed. They worked in comfortable partnership now, anticipating each other's movements, handing tools back and forth without needing to ask. Nora found herself looking forward to the mornings when Yates would arrive, the way he would touch his hat and say good morning in that quiet, steady voice. She noticed other things too. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he lifted heavy beams. The rare smile that transformed his serious face. The gentleness in his hands when he helped her down from the roof one evening, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. One afternoon in late October, a cold wind blowing down from the mountains, they finished hanging the main barn door. Yates stood back, surveying their work with satisfaction. It is a good barn, he said. Solid, better than what you had before, I would wager. Nora looked at the structure, still smelling of fresh-cut pine, and felt a surge of pride mixed with something deeper. We did this, she said. Together. Yes, Yates agreed. We did. She turned to him, suddenly overwhelmed with gratitude and something more, something that had been building between them for weeks. Yates, I do not know how to thank you. You have given me back my hope, my future. You have given me so much. Nora, he said, his voice rough. He took off his hat, turning it in his hands, suddenly looking younger and more uncertain. I need to tell you something. What is it? I did not just help you because it was the right thing to do. I mean, it was the right thing, but that is not the only reason. He met her eyes, and she saw vulnerability there that made her chest tight. From the first morning I saw you standing in front of that burned barn, so fierce and brave and determined not to break, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I have fallen for you, Nora, hard and deep and true. Her breath caught. She had hoped, suspected maybe, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her. I know it has not been long, Yates continued, the words coming faster now like he needed to get them all out. And I know you might not feel the same. But I had to tell you, I could not keep pretending this was just about helping a neighbor. It is more than that. You are more than that. Nora took a step closer to him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Yates Lawson, are you telling me you are in love with me? Yes, he said simply. I am. Good, she whispered, because I am in love with you too. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, bright and transformative. He reached for her, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that belied their callous strength. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed. His kiss was soft at first, tentative, asking permission. But when Nora wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, it deepened into something that spoke of all the feelings they had been holding back. She felt the scratch of his unshaven jaw, tasted dust and sunshine and something uniquely him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she felt dizzy with happiness. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," Yates admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "Then why did you wait so long?" "I was afraid you would not feel the same, afraid I would ruin what we had been building." His thumb stroked her cheek. "This barn is not the only thing I have been hoping to build with you, Nora." "What else?" she asked, though she thought she knew. "A life. A future. Something permanent and real." He pulled back slightly to look at her properly. "I know we have not known each other long, but out here, time works differently. You learn what someone is made of fast when you are working side by side, facing trouble together. And I know you are the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life." Nora felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "That is what I want too." They stood there in front of the barn they had built together, holding each other as the sun set and the desert wind sang around them. For the first time since her father had died, Nora felt like she was not alone. More than that, she felt like she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deepened and grew. Yates still stayed in the barn at night, propriety demanding they maintain separate sleeping quarters, but their days were spent in close partnership. They finished the interior of the barn, building stalls for the horses and a tack room for the salvaged and new equipment Yates had helped her acquire. They repaired fences and rounded up the last 2 missing horses. They worked Yates's land too, preparing it for winter, bringing in his small herd. And they talked, endless conversations that revealed more and more about each other. Nora learned that Yates could play the harmonica, that he had a younger sister back in Texas he had not seen in 5 years, that he secretly loved poetry though he pretended otherwise. Yates learned that Nora could shoot better than most men, that she had a weakness for peppermint candy, that she sang to the horses when she thought no one was listening. They kissed often, stolen moments of sweetness that left them both wanting more but holding back out of respect for each other. Yates was unfailingly proper, never pushing for more than Nora was ready to give, and she loved him more for it. In early November, Hammond visited again. This time he brought 3 of his men with him, all of them hard-looking characters with guns worn low on their hips. They rode up to find Nora and Yates working on the corral fence. "I see you rebuilt," Hammond said, his voice cold. "Waste of time and money, Miss Ashton. You should have taken my offer when you had the chance." "I am not selling," Nora said firmly. "Not now, not ever. That is unfortunate." Hammond gestured to his men. "You see, I need that water source, and I am prepared to take it one way or another." Yates stepped forward, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "You threatening her, Hammond?" "I am stating facts." Hammond's smile was ugly. "One woman and one broken-down cowboy cannot hold this land against determined opposition. Be smart, Miss Ashton. Sell to me now before something else unfortunate happens." "Get off my property," Nora said, her voice shaking with anger rather than fear. "Now." Hammond's expression darkened. But before he could respond, another voice called out from the direction of the road. "That is enough, Victor." Everyone turned to see Sheriff Tom Mercer riding up with 2 deputies. He was an older man with white hair and a weather-beaten face, wearing his badge prominently on his vest. "This is not your concern, Tom," Hammond said. "Threats against a landowner are my concern, especially when that landowner is a tax-paying citizen with every right to her property." Mercer's hand rested on his own gun. You and your boys need to leave. Now." For a long moment, Hammond stared at the sheriff, clearly calculating his options. Then he smiled, though it looked more like a grimace. "Of course, Sheriff. We were just having a conversation, were we not, Miss Ashton? You were leaving," Nora said coldly. Hammond wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. But the look he threw back over his shoulder promised this was not over. After they were gone, Sheriff Mercer dismounted and approached Nora and Yates. "I heard Hammond was giving you trouble," he said to Nora. "Thought I would check in." "Thank you, Sheriff," Nora said gratefully. "Do not thank me yet. I can keep him from making overt threats, but I cannot be here all the time. And Hammond is not above hiring men to do his dirty work." Mercer looked at Yates. "You staying close?" "Yes, sir," Yates said. "I am not leaving her alone." Mercer nodded approvingly. "Good man. You two watch yourselves. Hammond wants this land bad, and he does not give up easy." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat. "You need anything, you send word." After the sheriff left, Nora found herself shaking, the adrenaline catching up to her. Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "It is all right," he murmured against her hair. "He is gone. You are safe." "For now," Nora said, "but Mercer is right. Hammond will not give up. Then neither will we." Yates pulled back to look at her. "Nora, I have been thinking. I want to combine our properties, make them one ranch. Together we would be stronger, harder to intimidate. And if we were married, legally your property would have more protection." Nora's heart leaped. "Yates Lawson, are you proposing to me for practical reasons?" "No," he said quickly. "I am proposing because I love you and want to spend my life with you. The practical reasons are just a bonus." He took her hands in his. "Marry me, Nora, not because of Hammond or the ranch, but because I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Nora felt the rightness of it in her bones. This man who had come to her aid when she needed it most, who had worked beside her to rebuild not just a barn but her hope, who had shown her what love could look like when it was real and honest and true. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in the church in Albuquerque, with Sheriff Mercer and his wife as witnesses. Nora wore her mother's dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and carried wildflowers that Yates had picked that morning. Yates wore his best clothes and a look of such happiness that it made Nora's heart swell. "I, Yates Lawson, take you, Nora Ashton, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad, to protect you, cherish you, and love you for all the days of my life. I, Nora Ashton, take you, Yates Lawson, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Nora replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to support you, honor you, and love you for as long as we both shall live." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her in front of God and witnesses, sealing their union with tender passion. They walked out of the church into the November sunshine as man and wife, ready to face whatever came together. The combination of their properties gave them more land and more resources. They moved Yates's small herd to Nora's ranch, taking advantage of the better water source. They worked both properties, though they made Nora's the home base since the barn was new and the house was larger. Yates moved his belongings into the ranch house, and for the first time, the building felt like a true home to Nora rather than just the place where she lived. Their first night as husband and wife was spent in the bedroom that had been hers alone for so long. Yates was gentle and patient, treating her with a reverence that made her feel precious. They explored each other slowly, learning what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp or sigh. And when they finally came together fully, Nora felt complete in a way she never had before. as if she had been missing a piece of herself and only now found it. Afterwards, lying in Yates's arms, her head on his chest and his fingers trailing through her hair, Nora felt a peace she had not known since her father died. "Happy," Yates murmured into the darkness. "More than I knew I could be," Nora admitted. "I thought the fire had destroyed everything. But it led me to you. It led us to this. Maybe some things have to burn down before they can be rebuilt better," Yates said thoughtfully. "That barn we built together is stronger than the one you lost, and what we have together is stronger than what either of us had alone." "I love you," Nora whispered. "I love you too," Yates replied, kissing the top of her head. "Always will." Winter came to New Mexico with cold winds and occasional snow. Yates and Nora worked the ranch together, tending to the animals, maintaining equipment, keeping the homestead running. It was hard work, but they faced it side by side, and that made all the difference. Hammond left them alone for a while, but they knew it was just a matter of time before he made another move. They stayed vigilant, always aware, always prepared. Yates taught Nora to shoot even better than she already could, and they kept weapons accessible in both the house and the barn. In late December, their vigilance proved necessary. Yates was in the barn one evening, tending to a mare who was showing signs of colic, when he heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple riders, moving fast. He grabbed his rifle and stepped to the barn door just as Nora came out of the house with her own weapon. 6 men rode into the yard, all wearing bandanas over their faces. They carried torches, their intention clear. "Go back to Hammond," Yates called out, his rifle leveled. "Tell him this land is not for sale and never will be." One of the men laughed. "Hammond does not like to be refused." "Time you learned that lesson." He spurred his horse forward, torch raised, clearly intending to set fire to the barn. But before he could, Yates fired, hitting the torch and sending it flying from the man's hand. The sudden shot spooked the horses, several of them rearing. Nora fired next, deliberately shooting into the ground in front of the lead horses, causing more chaos. The riders struggled to control their mounts, their planned attack disrupted. "Next shot will not be a warning," Yates shouted. "Leave now, or we will defend our property." For a tense moment, the riders held their ground. Then, from the direction of the road, Sheriff Mercer appeared with 4 deputies, all with weapons drawn. "Drop those torches," Mercer commanded. "You are all under arrest for attempted arson and trespassing." The would-be arsonists looked at each other, clearly calculating their chances. Then, as one, they threw down their torches and raised their hands. The deputies moved in, disarming and handcuffing them. Mercer rode up to Nora and Yates. "Got word Hammond was planning something. One of his ranch hands came to me, said his conscience would not let him stay silent. Lucky we got here in time." "Thank you, Sheriff," Nora said, her voice shaking with relief and residual fear. "Thank me by pressing charges," Mercer said grimly. "With their testimony and that ranch hand as a witness, we might finally be able to prove Hammond's behind these attacks. Put him away where he belongs." Over the next few weeks, the case against Victor Hammond built steadily. The ranch hand who had warned the sheriff, a young man named Billy Thornton, testified that Hammond had ordered the attack on Nora's property. 2 of the captured arsonists, facing serious jail time, agreed to testify against Hammond in exchange for lighter sentences. The evidence was overwhelming. Hammond was arrested in January of 1877 and charged with conspiracy to commit arson, attempted arson, and criminal threats. His trial was held in February, and Nora and Yates both testified about the harassment and threats they had endured. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. Victor Hammond was sentenced to 10 years in the territorial prison. His ranch was sold to pay legal fees and restitution, the land divided among several smaller ranchers. The threat that had hung over Nora and Yates was finally, definitively ended. "It is over," Nora said that evening, standing with Yates on their porch and watching the sunset. "Really over." "Yes," Yates agreed, pulling her close. "Now we can focus on building our life without looking over our shoulders." And build they did. Through the spring of 1877, they expanded their operation, buying more cattle and horses. The combined properties thrived under their joint management, Nora's business sense complementing Yates's practical skills. They became known in the territory as a formidable partnership, a couple who had overcome adversity to create something lasting and successful. In June, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but had wanted to be certain before telling Yates. When she finally did, sitting him down after dinner one evening and taking his hands in hers, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "Truly?" he asked, his eyes wide with wonder and joy. "Truly," she confirmed, smiling through happy tears. "We are going to have a baby." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he whispered against her hair. "I love you so much, Nora." "I love you too," she replied. "I cannot wait to meet this child we made together." Yates became even more protective as Nora's pregnancy progressed. He insisted on doing the heavier ranch work himself, though Nora still helped with everything she could safely manage. They prepared the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery, Yates building a cradle with his own hands, carving their initials and the date into the wood. "So our child will always know when and how much we loved them," he explained as he worked. The baby, a son they named James after Nora's father, was born on a cold February morning in 1878. The birth was difficult, attended by a midwife from town, but both mother and baby came through healthy and strong. When Yates held his son for the first time, tears streamed unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect," he said in awe. "Nora, he is absolutely perfect." "He looks like you," Nora said fondly, exhausted but happy. The baby had his father's gray eyes and serious expression even in sleep. "Poor boy," Yates joked, but his voice was thick with emotion. Parenthood suited both of them. Yates was a devoted father, tender and patient with little James. Nora found a strength she had not known she possessed, balancing motherhood with ranch management. They took turns with night feedings, worked the ranch in shifts, supported each other through the sleepless exhaustion and overwhelming love that came with a newborn. As James grew, the ranch grew with him. By 1880, they had one of the most successful operations in the territory, respected by neighbors and sought after for their quality horses. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the workload, good men who treated Nora and Yates with respect and loyalty. In the spring of 1881, their daughter was born. They named her Sarah, after Yates's mother. She had Nora's dark hair and fierce spirit, crying lustily from the moment she entered the world and showing no signs of stopping. "She has your stubbornness," Yates said affectionately, walking the floor with the crying infant at 2 in the morning while 3-year-old James slept peacefully in the next room. "My stubbornness is why we still have this ranch," Nora reminded him with a tired smile. "True," Yates conceded, kissing his daughter's forehead. "And if she is half as strong as her mother, she will be able to do anything she sets her mind to." The years passed in a blur of work and love and laughter. James grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranch work almost before he could walk properly. Sarah was indeed as stubborn and fierce as her mother, fearless and adventurous, keeping her parents on their toes. In 1884, Nora gave birth to another son whom they named Robert. He was a sweet, gentle child, more interested in books and drawing than ranch work, and they loved him for exactly who he was. Yates built him a desk by the window in the main room where Robert could sit and draw the horses and landscapes he loved. Their home was full and loud and chaotic and wonderful. The ranch house that had once felt empty and lonely now rang with children's laughter and the sounds of a life fully lived. The barn that Nora and Yates had built together all those years ago still stood strong and solid, housing their horses and equipment, a daily reminder of what they had overcome and built together. On a warm evening in late summer of 1886, Nora and Yates sat on their porch after putting the children to bed. James, now 8, had finally stopped reading long enough to fall asleep. Sarah, at 5, had resisted bedtime with characteristic determination before finally succumbing. Robert, just 2, had been the easiest, falling asleep in Yates's arms during a bedtime story. "Remember the first time I saw you?" Yates asked, his arm around Nora's shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Standing in front of the burned barn in my nightgown and my father's coat," Nora recalled. "I must have looked a sight." "You looked brave," Yates corrected, "like someone who would not be broken no matter what life threw at her." "I fell a little bit in love with you right then, though I did not know it yet." Nora leaned into him, comfortable and content. "I thought you were just a kind stranger. I had no idea you would become my whole world." "That fire was the worst thing that had happened to you," Yates mused. "But it brought us together. Sometimes I think about that, about how something so terrible led to something so beautiful." "Hope flickered in the ashes," Nora said softly. "That is what I felt when you offered to help me rebuild, like maybe everything was not lost after all." "Nothing was lost," Yates said, kissing the top of her head. "Everything was just beginning." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside, their children slept safely. Around them, their ranch hummed with quiet evening life, animals settling for the night, the land resting. The barn stood dark and solid against the horizon, a monument to determination and partnership and love. 10 years had passed since the night the barn burned. 10 years of building and growing and loving. Nora thought about the frightened, grieving woman she had been, standing alone in front of the destruction of everything her father had built. She thought about the moment Yates had ridden into her life, offering help with no expectation of reward, driven only by decency and a shared understanding of what it meant to lose everything. She thought about all the moments that had followed. Working side by side in the hot sun, building something new from the ashes of the old. The first time Yates had told her he loved her, standing in front of the barn they had created together. Their wedding day, the beginning of a partnership that went far beyond business. The births of their children, each one a miracle that expanded her heart in ways she had not known possible. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, sensing her reflective mood. "Everything," Nora said. "How far we have come, how much we have built together. How grateful I am that you walked into my life when you did." "I am the grateful one," Yates insisted. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, everything I did not even know to hope for. A home, a family, a purpose, love." "We gave each other those things," Nora corrected. "That is what partnership means." Yates pulled her closer, and they stayed that way until the sky was full dark and the chill of evening drove them inside. They checked on the children one more time. James sprawled across his bed, Sarah curled into a tight ball under her blankets, Robert clutching the stuffed horse Yates had made him. Then they retired to their own room, the room they had shared for nearly 10 years now, and fell asleep in each other's arms. The ranch continued to prosper over the following years. By 1890, they had expanded their holdings, purchasing additional land as it became available. James, now 12, was already showing promise as a rancher, with a natural way with horses that reminded Nora of her father. Sarah, at 9, could ride better than most grown men and had announced her intention to compete in rodeos when she was old enough, much to her parents' combined pride and trepidation. Robert, now 6, still preferred books to ranch work, but he kept meticulous records of their cattle and horse breeding, his careful attention to detail proving invaluable to the operation. In 1891, Nora gave birth to their 4th child, another daughter they named Emma. She was a surprise, coming 5 years after Robert when they had thought their family was complete. But she was a joyful surprise, a happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content with whatever was happening around her. 4 children, Yates marveled, holding his youngest daughter and watching his 3 older children play in the yard. "When did we become a family of 6? One day at a time," Nora said, smiling at the sight. "Just like we built everything else." The New Mexico territory continued to change around them. The railroad came closer, bringing new opportunities for shipping cattle and horses to eastern markets. Towns grew and modernized. The wild, lawless days of the frontier were slowly giving way to something more settled and civilized. But some things remained constant. The land, harsh and beautiful, demanding and rewarding. The work, hard but satisfying. The bond between Nora and Yates, forged in fire and tested by time, growing only stronger with each passing year. On a spring morning in 1895, 17 years after their wedding, Nora and Yates stood in front of the barn again. It needed some repairs, normal wear and tear after nearly 2 decades of use. They had decided to tackle it together, just the 2 of them, the way they had built it in the first place. "Remember when this was just a pile of burnt timber?" Nora asked, running her hand over the weathered but still solid wood. "I remember everything about that time," Yates said. "Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment I fell deeper in love with you. We were so young," Nora marveled. She was 39 now, Yates 42. Lines creased their faces, put there by sun and laughter and hard work. Gray threaded through Yates's hair, but his eyes were the same, steady and true and full of love when they looked at her. "Young enough to believe we could rebuild from nothing," Yates agreed. "Smart enough to know we had to do it together." James came riding up, now a tall, capable 17-year-old who ran more of the ranch operations with each passing year. "Pa, we have got those horses ready for breaking whenever you are ready," he called. "Be there in a minute, son," Yates called back. He turned to Nora. "Duty calls." "It always does," Nora said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I will start on these repairs." "You go teach our son everything you know." "Yes, madam," Yates said with a smile, the same smile that had made her heart flutter 17 years ago and still did today. Nora watched him walk away, still strong and capable, still the man who had appeared in her darkest hour and offered her hope. She thought about the barn that had burned, the disaster that had seemed like an ending but had really been a beginning. She thought about standing beside her cowboy, learning to trust, learning to love, learning that together they could face anything. The sound of hammering rang out across the ranch as Nora began the repairs. It was a sound she loved, the sound of building, maintaining, improving. The sound of a life well lived and a love well earned. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner around the big table Yates had built years ago. James sat at one end, already taking on the responsibilities of the eldest child. Sarah, now 13 and every bit as fierce as predicted, regaled them with stories of the horse she had trained that day. Robert, 11, shyly showed them drawings he had made of the ranch, detailed and beautiful. Emma, just 4, sat in a high chair and demanded attention from everyone. Nora looked around the table at her family, her heart so full it ached. This was what she and Yates had built from the ashes of that burned barn. Not just a successful ranch, though it was that. Not just financial security, though they had that too. But a family, a legacy, a love that would endure long after they were gone. After the children were in bed, Nora and Yates walked out to the barn together. The evening was clear and cool, stars brilliant overhead. They stood in the doorway, looking at the structure they had built with their own hands so many years ago. "I would not change a thing," Nora said quietly. "Not one single moment, even the fire, because it brought me to you." "Nor would I," Yates agreed. He took her hand, linking their fingers together. "You are my greatest adventure, Nora Lawson. You always will be." "And you are my home," Nora replied. "You gave me back my hope when I thought it was gone forever. You stood beside me and we rebuilt together, not just a barn, but an entire life." They stood there together as they had so many times before, partners in every sense of the word. The barn rose behind them, solid and enduring. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and productive. Their children slept safely in the house. Everything they had dreamed of, everything they had worked for, had come to pass. The years continued to unfold with all the joys and challenges that life brings. In 1898, James married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the far edge of the property, expanding the family operation. In 1900, they gave Nora and Yates their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas. Holding her grandson for the first time, Nora felt the circle of life complete itself in a profound way. Sarah, true to her word, did compete in rodeos, becoming locally famous for her riding skills. She married later, at 25, to a man named Daniel who was wise enough to appreciate her fierce independence. Robert surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, his careful mind and attention to detail serving him well. But he never forgot the ranch, coming home often and eventually handling all the legal affairs for the family business. Emma grew into a talented musician, filling the house with piano music and song. Through it all, Nora and Yates remained the solid foundation upon which everything else was built. They aged together gracefully, their love deepening with time. They still worked the ranch, though less strenuously as the years passed, and their children and grandchildren took on more responsibility. They still sat on the porch each evening, watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. In 1905, on their wedding anniversary, Yates took Nora back to the church in Albuquerque where they had married 28 years earlier. They renewed their vows in front of their children and grandchildren, reaffirming promises that had never wavered. "I, Yates Lawson, still take you, Nora Lawson, to be my wife," he said, his voice strong despite his 64 years. "I have stood beside you for 28 years, and I will stand beside you for however many more God grants us. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I, Nora Lawson, still take you, Yates Lawson, to be my husband," Nora replied, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me when I was lost. You gave me hope when I had none, and you have loved me every day since. You are my greatest blessing." There was not a dry eye in the church as they kissed, sealing their recommitment to each other. Afterwards, there was a celebration on the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the territory. The story of how they had met, how they had rebuilt from disaster, how they had built a lasting legacy together, had been told and retold until it took on an almost mythic quality. But for Nora and Yates, it was simply their life. The life they had chosen, the life they had fought for, the life they had built together one day, one decision, one loving action at a time. As the party wound down and guests departed, Nora and Yates found themselves once again at the barn. It had been repaired and maintained over the years, but it was still fundamentally the same structure they had built in the fall of 1876, almost 30 years ago now. "You remember the day we hung that main door?" Yates asked, pointing to the door that now hung slightly crooked with age but still functioned perfectly. "I remember every day we worked on this barn," Nora said. "Every board we placed, every nail we hammered, every moment we spent building something from nothing." "We built more than we knew at the time," Yates reflected. "We thought we were just rebuilding a barn, but we were building trust, building partnership, building love, building a life," Nora added. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her, still strong and protective even after all these years. "The best life I could have imagined." They stood there as the sun set, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch bustled with life. Grandchildren played in the yard. James and Elizabeth worked in the corrals. The sounds of family and home filled the air. New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, a moment of celebration throughout the territory. By then, Nora was 58 and Yates 61. They attended the statehood ceremonies in Santa Fe with their children, proud to see the land they loved take this important step forward. The ranch was now being run primarily by James and his sons, though Nora and Yates still contributed what they could. Yates's hands, so strong and capable for so many years, were gnarled with arthritis now. Nora's back ached from a lifetime of hard work. But they were content, satisfied with what they had accomplished, secure in the knowledge that their legacy would continue long after they were gone. On a warm evening in 1918, 40 years after the barn had been rebuilt, Nora and Yates sat on their porch as they had thousands of times before. Yates was 71 now, Nora 64. Their hair was white, their faces deeply lined, but the love in their eyes when they looked at each other was as fresh and true as it had been 40 years earlier. "I was thinking today," Yates said, "about that first morning I saw you. You were standing in front of that burned barn and you looked so lost but so determined not to show it. I thought to myself, that is a woman worth knowing." "I thought you were just a stranger being kind," Nora admitted. "I had no idea you would become my whole world." "Best decision I ever made, helping you rebuild that barn," Yates said. "Because I got to rebuild a life with you. I got everything I ever wanted and so much more than I knew to hope for." "We rebuilt together," Nora corrected gently. "That is what made it work. Neither of us alone could have done what we did together." "True," Yates agreed. He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis. "I love you, Nora. Have since the beginning, will until the end." "I love you too," Nora said. "Always and forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Inside, their great-grandchildren were visiting, the house full of noise and laughter. The barn stood dark against the horizon, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they faced their challenges together. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, a legacy that would endure for generations. Nora thought about the terrified woman she had been, watching everything her father had built burn to ashes. She thought about Yates riding up with her horses, offering help with no expectations. She thought about working side by side, learning to trust, learning to love, learning that sometimes the worst disasters lead to the greatest blessings. She thought about standing beside her cowboy, rebuilding not just a barn but a life, a future, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. She thought about the children they had raised, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren they had been blessed to know, the life they had built together from hope and hard work and unwavering commitment. "No regrets," she said aloud. "Not a single one," Yates agreed. Yates passed peacefully in his sleep on a cold January morning in 1920 at the age of 73. He had lived a full, rich life, and when his time came, he went gently, with Nora holding his hand and his family surrounding him. His last words were to Nora, simple and true. "I love you. Thank you for the best 42 years of my life." Nora mourned deeply but not desperately. She had been blessed with 42 years of the truest love, and she would not dishonor that by falling apart. She kept the ranch running with the help of her children and grandchildren. She sat on the porch each evening, feeling Yates's presence beside her. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, the cowboy who had helped her rebuild when all seemed lost, who had stood beside her through every challenge, who had loved her with a constancy and devotion that never wavered. On warm evenings, she would walk out to the barn they had built together with their own hands in the fall of 1876. She would run her hands over the wood, still solid after more than 40 years, and remember working side by side. Remember the first time Yates had kissed her. Remember building their life together, one board, one nail, one loving moment at a time. Nora lived another 8 years, active and engaged until the very end. She passed in her sleep in March of 1928, at the age of 74, in the bedroom she had shared with Yates for so many years. Her last conscious thought was of that first morning, when a cowboy had ridden up with her horses and offered to help her rebuild, offering her hope when she thought all was lost. They were buried side by side in the cemetery in Albuquerque, their graves marked with a simple stone that read, "Yates and Nora Lawson. Together they rebuilt. Together forever." The ranch continued, passed down through generations. The barn they had built together stood for another 50 years before age finally required it be replaced. But James, by then an old man himself, made sure to save some of the original timber, using it to build a mantel over the fireplace in the main house, so that something of what his parents had created together would always remain. The story of Nora and Yates became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. The story of how the barn burned and hope flickered in the ashes. The story of how she stood beside her cowboy, and they rebuilt together, creating something far more lasting and valuable than any physical structure. They built a love that endured beyond death, a legacy that lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched, a testament to what two people could accomplish when they faced life's challenges together with courage, determination, and unwavering love.